Hey guys, it's Megan, also known as Reading with Hot Chocolate. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to those who are new. Today I have two books to review. The first one is Go Luck Yourself by Sara Raasch, and the second is Titanic First Accounts, with a foreword by Tim Malton and an afterword by Nicholas Wade. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of my bookish adventures, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. All right, let's start with Go Luck Yourself by Sara Raasch. And I am so sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. I debated about 100 different ways to say your last name, and that is what I stuck with, and I feel like it is incorrect. But here we are. So Go Luck Yourself is the sequel to A Nightmare Before Christmas, and this book focuses on the second son of Santa Claus, also known as Chris, and the crown prince of St. Patrick's Day. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 hot chocolates because, as a reminder here, I rate everything in hot chocolates because I am reading with hot chocolate, and stars just seemed off-brand, quite honestly. And I gave it 2.5 chili peppers because there's quite a bit of spice in here. So we meet up with Chris. He is at university, and let me tell you, this kid needs some anti-anxiety meds more than anyone I've ever read about in a book. And it's very on brand for him to be stressed out and worried about everything going on. He feels a lot of pressure as the second son to be there and support his brother and be kind of like a sounding board for him as he becomes the new Santa Claus. And he's really trying to finish school. He has a favorite study room, which is kind of our inciting incident. And he goes on to the computer and reserves it like you're supposed to. And every time he goes to that study room, there's some other guy there and he won't give it up. And Chris is not one to play with his magic very often, but he gets so mad that he tinsel bombs the study room with the person in the room that is always in the way. So that guy comes out of the room huffing and puffing and angry, and no one can figure out where all this tinsel came from. And it kind of goes viral on the internet, and because everyone just thinks it's hilarious that this room is full of tinsel and this guy is somehow in that room, and no one's really questioning how it got there because I don't know why. I probably would, but it was hilarious. After the tinsel bombing incident, Chris rushes back home because he gets a 911 call from his brother because his brother has discovered that someone has been stealing Christmas's magic. So all of the holidays have magic, and Christmas has the most because in the first book we learn that there's been some shady dealings going on with their dad and magic. So they're trying to repay these other holidays' magic. So if someone is stealing their magic, it's going to really screw up the returning of magic to other holidays. And they are pretty sure that it's St. Patrick's Day. Why, might you ask? Because they find a little clover sitting next to the magic radar. And that is why they decide, hey, we should go see St. Patrick's Day. And they come up with kind of an elaborate ruse so that Chris can go and spy and see if he can figure out if it is indeed St. Patrick's Day stealing their magic, or if it was just a coincidence. So he heads off to Ireland in time for St. Patrick's Day. He's going to be there for the whole week because that's part of the ruse of he wants to experience the other holidays and all this stuff. And that is when he sees Lachlan and realizes that Lachlan is the asshole that has been stealing his study room. And that means he tinsel bombed the Prince of St. Patrick's Day with Christmas magic. My favorite way that he describes Lachlan is that he describes him as Chris Evans from Knives Out, so the cable knit sweater and all that kind of vibe, and I instantly could get a really good visual of what Lachlan looks like, so I appreciate that description. Thank you for that. Wouldn't be a little bit of a romance if we didn't have a little bit of enemies to lovers. They don't like each other. Chris thinks that Lachlan is stealing from Christmas, and he also really quickly realizes that he may be falling for Lachlan. He can't decide if he thinks Lachlan is falling for him or not. And there's some really fun interactions between the two of them in the art studio that Lachlan has because he's a fantastic artist. And we really quickly learned that Lachlan is not really in charge of St. Patrick's Day. His skeezy uncle is the problem because the magic of St. Patrick's Day has to do with luck. Obviously, makes sense. And it puts you in places where you're supposed to be, gives you, leads you towards things that appear to be lucky, or gives you like the momentum to be in the right place at the right time, which is partially why he's at the study room, because he just keeps sensing that he's supposed to be at that study room. Come to find out, it's because that's where Chris is. So it's kind of his magic working. His uncle is like hoarding magic. They don't even barely use it for St. Patrick's Day. It's like a whole lot of drama. I hate his uncle with a fiery, fiery passion. He is like the capitalist of magic. He wants it all for himself. He wants to use it for all of his own good and could care less about St. Patrick's Day. And for some reason, he's convinced everybody that Lachlan is like a shit prince and shouldn't be in charge. We'll find out why. Lachlan has two sisters. Love them. They are absolutely hilarious. One of them is much more trusting than the other. The other one is very snarky. So they're kind of a fun back and forth a lot of times between them and Chris. And their conversations around whether he and Lachlan are hooking up or not are always entertaining and a lot of fun. Chris does embolden Lachlan to start standing up for his holiday. He calls his court together for one of the first times that he has done it, that his uncle hasn't been in charge. So he is starting to come into his own and really kind of say, hey, what you think you know about me, you don't know about me. And I think it's kind of hot and kind of cool that he's getting that confidence. Chris still needs anti-anxiety meds. 100% nonstop needs anxiety meds. He is a ball of stress. But Lachlan does have the ability to kind of chill him out. So they're a little bit of a good foil there. But overall, fantastic, cute love story. I can't wait to see what she does next. I'm guessing it may be Iris, which, if you remember from the first book, that is our Easter princess, who Chris thought he was in love with. Chris is not in love with Iris. He was in love with the idea of Iris, because that's who he thought he was supposed to be in love with. So he does struggle a little bit with his sexual orientation and identity, trying to figure out like what he really wants from his partner. So it's a journey for him of self-discovery. Lots of journeys. They're both on a journey kind of to discover themselves and discover their true power within themselves and what they can do for their holidays and for the world as a whole. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. I gave it 4 hot chocolates. And you can want to read the first one first. Go read Nightmare Before Christmas and then read Go Luck Yourself. All right, I am getting in my Titanic book on the last possible day of Titanic month because I got a little bit behind on reviews. So the second book I'm going to talk about today is called Titanic First Accounts. It's a foreword written by Tim Malton and an afterword written by Nicholas Wade. But all of the things in between are actual accounts from survivors. If you are a Titanic hyperfixated kid like I was, this book is going to give you life. I gave this book 4 hot chocolates because, as I said earlier, I rate in hot chocolates, not in stars. Every year, I try to read a Titanic book in the month of April. I have several back here that I've read over the years. And this one caught my eye because it says first accounts. And that to me was like, hey, that's going to be survivors telling their stories in the time that it happened, which is exactly what it was. And it is very evident that James Cameron also read these accounts, because there are a lot of things when you're reading it that you're going to be able to picture it word for word from the movie, because there's not that many resources, right? We have A Night to Remember, we have this book, we have the court testimonies, but there's not a lot of other information. It's not like present day where you had cell phones and media and all these things. It's much more written, and there's just not as many accounts. Also, there weren't as many survivors as there should have been, as we all know. But let's not get down that rabbit hole, shall we? Let's talk about some of the things that we hear about in this book. What really I loved was that you got to read firsthand about whether the ship broke up or not. We know today, as of 1985, when Bob Ballard found the Titanic, that the ship did in fact break up. But it was a heated debate at the time, and a lot of the survivors said the ship broke up. And basically, the press went, no, couldn't have, didn't happen, could not have, steel too strong. And they're like, oh, we were on the damn thing. It sank and it split in half. So there's a lot of accounts of the actual sinking and kind of what happened and how it appeared to happen to the people that were out in the lifeboats, which was really fascinating. One thing that I liked and I thought really interesting, and I don't know if it's been proven or disproven. I think some of it maybe has been disproven by the most recent Nat Geo documentary, because you can actually see the boilers in place, at least in one of the boiler rooms. But they were all talking about how as the ship was sinking by the bow, that they started to just hear kind of crashes, and that it was all of everything that wasn't nailed down, even if it was nailed down and not nailed down well, was just crashing through the decks as the ship kind of started to go more upright. So that could have been the boilers, that could have been any number of things. And I never really thought about that sound being why people said they thought they heard explosions. And it was literally everything just falling through the decks as the ship was sinking. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, in the Nat Geo documentary, you can see a row of the boilers still in place, but that's just one boiler room. There were many other boiler rooms, so it's very possible that some of them came loose. There's some on the sea floor. That's how James Cameron found the Titanic. They found one of the boilers loose first. So it's very possible that that sound they were hearing was a lot of the boilers kind of falling out of the ship, basically, falling through the ship. You do get to get a little firsthand view of Molly Brown's lifeboat. And I wrote down that the officer, I think it's Hitchers was his name. He wasn't an officer, he was just a crew member. Hitchers on her boat was a pain in the ass in real life and a pain in the ass in the movie. He's the one that says, if you don't shut that hole in your face. That guy. Yes, I've watched this movie too many times. They describe him as being really aggressive on the lifeboats, and he basically sat in that top little corner and refused to help row the whole night. He made the women row, and I just think he sucked in general. But that was his lot in life, I guess. I did love that they talked about, like, Officer Lowell not letting men into the boats. Like, people would go up to him and he'd be like, no, get out of my boats. Nope, you're not getting on this boat. Women and children only. He was very steadfast in that. Lowe is also the only officer that went back. So in Titanic, when you see the guy going back and he gets Rose, the guy goes, come about! That is Lowe. Not to be confused with Lightoller, because for a while I feel like the movie they look so similar that people kind of got them confused. Lightoller was not in a lifeboat. Lightoller was standing on top of a lifeboat that had flipped over with like 30 other people in it. And actually reading the stories of those 30 guys on top of this lifeboat standing in the middle of the Atlantic was crazy. And it talks about so many people that you meet in the movie that survived on that lifeboat. Lightoller, the radio operator, the chef, and Mr. Gracie, who Rose has dinner with in the first class cabin. So a lot of the men that survived that you interact with in the movie are actually on top of the flipped over lifeboat, and Lightoller's standing on either side, and they're all trying to keep it steady, and it was like 30 men. It's crazy. I was salty as hell after reading this book that we didn't get a full scene of that shot of all of them on the lifeboat. But if you do have the Titanic anniversary DVD, it's on there. There's a quick deleted scene where you see Lightoller standing on top of the lifeboat with a bunch of people. I'm rambling and I don't care because I am a nerd when it comes to Titanic, so I'm trying to give you a little bit of everything that's in this book. Obviously, no need for spoiler warnings because we already know what happens. The ship sinks. The Duff Gordons went out on one of the first lifeboats, and they were one of the ones that was so empty that they're calling their lifeboat back to actually put more people on it. And the people in the lifeboat are like, no, we don't want to do that. Because they've had to row, right? They're rowing these massive boats. Mostly women, maybe a handful of crewmen on the boat, but mostly women. And they're trying to get away from the boat because they're worried that when the boat sinks, that the suction is going to pull them down, which was a very real possibility. So the captain and people are like, hey, bring these boats back. We can put more people on them. And they're like, sorry, can't hear you. Call again. New number, who dis? They're not coming back. Selfishly or not selfishly, I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. But they did not go back. And it boggles my mind that they launched that boat with so few people in it with the Duff Gordons, because the Duff Gordons were pretty hoity-toity for the time. So one of the most fascinating things about this book to me was the continued reports of just how calm it was on the boat. And I think part of that was that it was 1912 and the writing style and the decorum of 1912 would have been everybody was so calm. Everything was going so well. No one was shoving. No one was losing their minds. No one was screaming and running around the boat because they kept repeatedly saying it was so calm. Everyone was so orderly. But I feel like that was just kind of the first class view, so to speak, of the boats, because probably down below was chaos because they couldn't figure out how to get up to the boat deck and all of that. But it was really interesting that they continuously talked about how calm it was on the boat deck. And I just find that so hard to believe until maybe the last few minutes when they really realized that they were going to sink. And I'm sure it was chaos, but I would imagine it was chaos even before that. Oh, one of the other people that I always have mixed feelings about in anything Titanic related is J. Bruce Ismay. You can never make me like this man. You can't. You can't do it. Between the actors that play him being so good at making you hate him, and then just even reading the accounts of things. Do I blame him for the sinking? Kind of. Because he was so determined to set records with the Titanic crossing that I feel like he genuinely did pressure Captain Smith to speed up and to not pay attention to ice warnings, and I do think he played a hand in it. Is he 100% responsible? No, because at the end of the day, it's the captain's boat, and the captain also made decisions. Titanic, to me, is like the ultimate domino game, right? Because there's a fire in one of the bunkers, there's no binoculars, the water's calm, they're going too fast, they're ignoring the ice warnings, they don't have enough lifeboats. All those things just came together at the same time, which ironically Titanic did in fact have more lifeboats than what were actually required by maritime law at the time. So fun fact, because people like to point the finger at the lifeboats, and they actually had more than they were required to, but they still didn't have enough for everybody on board. But she was unsinkable. Why would you need lifeboats for an unsinkable ship? So much for that theory. I could talk about Titanic forever. There were times in this book where it was telling you like who was moving around in the lifeboats after the sinking, and some of it I was like, I can't remember who all these people are. I don't really care. And because of the era that it was written and recorded, it would only name the first class passengers. It would say so and so, so and so, so and so. It would name the crew sometimes, and then it would say 2 first class or 2 third class, 2 second class, and whatever. So it's kind of interesting. You didn't get a lot of information on the second and third class passengers, which is fairly accurate for what we know today. We know all the grand stories of the first class passengers who survived because they were first class passengers and they were people of influence. We also know who didn't survive, like the Strausses, because she wouldn't leave her husband. Those were the founder of Macy's, by the way. And if you watch the movie, it's the old couple in the bed. She refused to leave him, and according to a lot of reports, her famous line that is given to Rose later on in the James Cameron version is, "Where you go, I go." And we hear that, right? Like the "you jump, I jump," same idea. So that is kind of where that line comes from there. But I love all things Titanic, and I will read any and all books by the Titanic. The Titanic can't write books, guys. The Titanic is a ship about the Titanic, because it's just been a hyperfixation of mine for so long. And I definitely recommend Titanic first accounts because it gives you the true story from the people who survived within days, weeks, months, years of the sinking. So their memories and everything that they saw and experienced is very fresh, which is always good when you're reading a historical account. So like I said, I gave it 4 hot chocolates, and you should definitely go and check it out if you're a Titanic nerd like me. Thank you guys for tuning in and hearing my book reviews today. Make sure you don't miss any of my bookish adventures by subscribing and turning on those notifications. See you again real soon.